this video, we're taking a gentle journey back in time to medieval England to experience a single, unremarkable day in the life of an ordinary village. No grand battles, no royal proclamations, just the slow, steady rhythm of life as it was lived by most people in the 1300s. We'll move through the hours from dawn to dusk, feeling the texture of wool against skin, hearing the distant sound of church bells, and sensing the weight of a wooden bucket filled with water from the well. This is history at its most human, most quiet, most real. So settle in, let your breathing slow, and allow yourself to drift back 7 centuries to a time when life moved at the pace of the sun across the sky. Please remember to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share in the comments where you're watching from. Now let's begin our slow day in medieval England. You wake slowly, gradually becoming aware of your surroundings. It's not a sudden awakening, not the jarring alarm of modern life, but rather a gentle emergence from sleep that feels almost natural, almost right. The darkness around you is thick and complete, the kind of darkness that simply doesn't exist in the modern world with its streetlights and electronic glows. This is the darkness of a world lit only by fire, and right now, there is no fire. You lie still for a moment, oriented not by sight, but by sound and touch and the familiar geography of your small space. You're on a straw mattress, and you can feel the individual stalks through the rough linen sack that contains them. Some of the straw has broken down over the months since it was last refreshed, creating slightly softer spots, mixed with places where the stems are still firm enough to poke through the fabric. You've learned where these spots are, learned to shift slightly in the night to avoid the worst of them. The air is cool against your face, the only part of you exposed to the room. You're wearing the same long linen shift you wore yesterday, as you do every night, and you're covered with a heavy woolen blanket that smells faintly of lanolin and sheep and the wood smoke that permeates everything in this world. Next to you, pressed close for warmth, is your wife, and you can hear her breathing slow and steady. Beyond her, against the wall, your 2 children sleep on their own mattress, a smaller version of yours. You can't see them in the darkness, but you know they're there, curled together like puppies. The house is a single room, perhaps 20 feet long and 15 feet wide, with walls of wattle and daub, that ancient mixture of woven wooden strips, plastered with a combination of mud, clay, straw, and animal dung. The walls are thick, good for keeping out the worst of winter's cold and summer's heat, though they can never quite keep out the dampness that rises from the earth floor. That floor, packed dirt mixed with rushes and herbs, has been there for generations, compressed and smoothed by countless footsteps until it's almost as hard as stone in places. Above you, though you can't see it in the darkness, is a thatched roof, thick layers of bundled reeds and straw, layered and compressed, that keep out most of the rain. When it rains hard, there are a few places where water finds its way through, and you've learned where these are too, moving the mattresses and the few possessions you own to avoid the worst of it. During particularly wet periods, the whole house takes on a musty smell, the smell of damp thatch and wet earth, and you know that come spring, you'll need to add new thatch to the worst areas, perhaps trade labor with your neighbor who's better at it than you are. But that's a thought for another time. Right now, in this moment of awakening, you're simply becoming aware of the world again, emerging from sleep's void into consciousness. You can hear very faintly the sound of a rooster crowing. It's not your rooster. Yours won't crow for another little while. But someone's rooster has decided it's time to announce the coming day. The sound is distant, muffled by the walls of your house, but it's there. That first declaration that night is ending. You don't move yet. There's no reason to move. Not quite yet. You've learned over the years to judge the time by 100 small signs, by the quality of darkness, by the sounds of the village, by some internal clock that runs on the rhythm of the sun. It's not quite time yet. It's that strange hour between night and morning when the world holds its breath before beginning again. Your wife stirs slightly beside you, makes a small sound in her sleep, then settles again. You think about the day ahead, running through it in your mind as you do every morning. It's spring now, or rather late spring, moving towards summer. The planting is done, the fields of wheat and barley and oats that belong to the manor are sprouting, green shoots pushing up through the dark earth. Your own small plot, your toft, shows similar signs of life. Soon, very soon, the real work will begin. The endless cycle of weeding and maintaining and protecting the crops from birds and animals and weather. But that's the work of the fields. Before that, before you can even think about walking out to the strips of land you work in the great open fields, there are the morning tasks, the unchanging routine that structures every day. The animals need tending, the fire needs rekindling, water needs fetching, bread needs making. The list is always the same, has been the same for as long as you can remember, was the same for your father before you and his father before him. You become aware of a gradual change in the darkness. It's not that you can see anything, not yet, but there's a quality to the black that wasn't there before, a sense of density shifting, of the absolute void of night beginning to thin at its edges. You've learned to recognize this change, this first hint that somewhere beyond the eastern horizon, the sun is preparing to rise. You shift slightly, carefully, not wanting to wake your wife yet. She works as hard as you do, harder perhaps, with her domain being the house and the garden and the endless tasks of cooking and cleaning and making and mending. She deserves these last few moments of sleep. You ease yourself up onto one elbow, moving slowly to avoid the straw rustling too much. Your body aches in the familiar places, the lower back from bending over in the fields, the shoulders from carrying and lifting, the knees from kneeling and crouching. You're not old, not yet, perhaps 35 or 40 years, but this life ages a body quickly. Still, you're strong enough, healthy enough. You've avoided the worst of the diseases that sweep through from time to time, and you thank God for that in your prayers. Sitting up fully now, you reach out in the darkness, your hands finding the edge of the wooden bench that sits against the wall near the mattress. This is where you keep your outer clothes, folded and waiting. You find your tunic, heavy wool, the color indeterminate in the darkness, but you know it to be a muddy brownish gray, the color of undyed wool, the color of work. You pull it on over your linen shift, feeling the rough wool against your skin, the weight of it settling on your shoulders. Your hose, the leg coverings that reach from foot to waist, are harder to manage in the darkness, but you've done this 1,000 times before. You stand, hunched slightly because the roof is low here at the edges, and pull them on, tying them to your brace, the simple linen undergarment that serves as small clothes. The hose are wool too, thick and slightly scratchy, with a few thin places that will need patching soon. But they're serviceable. They'll do. Your wife is clever with the needle, able to make the patches blend so well you can barely see them. Wool is precious. Every scrap is saved and reused and used again. Your shoes are leather, simple affairs that are really more like leather bags tied around your feet, but they've been oiled and they keep out most of the wet. And they're certainly better than going barefoot, which you do in summer sometimes, but not now. Not when there's still mud and morning dampness everywhere. You slip your feet into them, tie the leather thongs that hold them secure. Now comes the moment you've been delaying, the moment you must leave the relative warmth of the house and face the outside world. You move toward the door, your hands outstretched in the darkness, finding it by memory and touch. It's a simple door, wooden planks held together with iron nails that cost dearly, hung on leather hinges. There's a wooden bar on the inside that keeps it closed at night. Not that there's much fear of thieves in a village where everyone knows everyone, and no one has much worth stealing, but it's tradition, it's security, it's what's done. You lift the bar carefully, quietly, and set it aside. Your hands find the latch, a simple wooden mechanism, and you lift it. The door swings inward, the leather hinges creaking slightly, and cool air rushes in, fresh and clean and shockingly cold against your face after the close warmth of the house. The darkness outside is different from the darkness inside. Outside, the sky has begun its slow transformation from black to deep blue, the very first stage of dawn. There are no stars visible, or rather, the brightest ones are beginning to fade, retreating before the coming sun. The air smells of earth and growing things, of wood smoke from a fire somewhere in the village, of animals and the village midden heap and fresh water and 1,000 other things that combine to make the particular smell of this place, your place. You step outside, and the dirt of the small yard is cool and slightly damp beneath your feet, even through the leather of your shoes. The yard is tiny, just a small space between your house and the street, if the narrow dirt path that runs through the village can be called a street. Your garden plot extends behind the house, a long, narrow strip where your wife grows the vegetables that supplement your diet. The onions and leeks and cabbages and herbs that make plain pottage bearable. You can see the outlines of things now, shapes emerging from the darkness. The village is a collection of houses like yours, perhaps 40 or 50 of them, strung out along either side of the main path, with smaller paths branching off here and there. At one end of the village is the church. You can see its square tower outlined against the slowly lightening sky, solid and reassuring. At the other end are the fields, the great open fields that dominate all life here, and beyond them, dark and somehow threatening. Even though you've known them all your life, the woods. The church bell rings, a single deep note that rolls across the village, and you're not surprised. You knew it was coming, knew it was about that time. This is the bell for Lord's, the dawn prayer, though most of the villagers won't attend. That's for the priest and perhaps the reeve, and one or two of the more pious souls. Most people have work to do, animals to tend, lives to live. You make the sign of the cross anyway, a quick gesture, and murmur a brief prayer. God is always watching, always there. And it's good to acknowledge him even if you can't spend hours in church. Your pig, penned in a small sty at the side of the house, hears you moving about and begins to grunt and shuffle. The pig is important, a valuable possession. It eats the scraps and waste from the house, roots about in the village common, and in late autumn it will be slaughtered, providing meat that will be salted and smoked and will help you survive the winter. You can see its dark shape moving in the pen, and you reach over the low wattle fence to scratch behind its ears, feeling the coarse hair and warm skin. The pig grunts appreciatively. Your chickens, 3 of them, are roosting in a small lean-to built against the house. You can hear them beginning to stir, making the soft burbling sounds that chickens make. Soon they'll start laying, 1 egg every day or 2 from each hen. Precious protein that can be eaten or sometimes traded or sold. You check that they have water in their crude bowl, a hollowed-out piece of wood, and you make a mental note to let them out into the yard once it's fully light, so they can scratch and peck and find whatever tiny insects and seeds they can. The cow is the biggest concern. She's kept in a small shed, really just a roof and 3 walls, on the other side of the house. As you approach, you can hear her shifting, Hear the soft sound of her breathing. She's a small cow, brown and bony, but she's healthy and she gives milk, and that milk means cheese and butter and survival. She also provides the manure that makes the garden grow, and someday, many years from now, when she's too old to give milk anymore, she'll provide leather and horns and, if you're very lucky, a bit of tough meat. You slip into the shed, your eyes now adjusted enough to the dim light that you can see her shape. She turns her head toward you, her large dark eyes gentle and patient. You pat her shoulder, feeling the warmth of her body in the cool morning air. There's hay in her manger, last night's feeding, and she's been chewing her cud peacefully. You'll need to milk her soon, but first you need to attend to something else, something more urgent. The fire has gone out overnight, or rather, it's been banked, buried under ashes to preserve the coals, but now it needs to be brought back to life. Fire is precious in this world, more precious than most modern people can imagine. Yes, you can make fire with flint and steel if you absolutely must, striking sparks onto a piece of char cloth or dried fungus, but it's difficult and time-consuming and not something you want to do every morning. Better to keep the fire alive, passing it from day to day, week to week, month to month. You go back into the house. By now, the light coming through the door and the small window opening, just a hole in the wall really, covered with an oiled cloth that admits some light while keeping out most of the weather, is enough to see by. The hearth is in the center of the room, a raised area of packed earth and stone, and you kneel beside it. Using a stick, you carefully push aside some of the ash, revealing the red glow of coals beneath. You feel a small satisfaction. The coals have survived the night. You add some very fine dry tinder, dried grass, and tiny twigs, blowing gently. A tiny flame flickers, catches, grows. You add slightly larger pieces, building the fire slowly, carefully, the way you were taught as a child. Soon you have a proper fire going, small flames dancing, and you add a few pieces of actual wood, precious wood that you gathered over many days from the woods and the hedgerows. The smoke rises up, some of it escaping through the hole in the roof, the smoke hole that's the only chimney this house has. Some of the smoke lingers in the room. It always does, making your eyes water slightly. But you're used to it. Everyone is used to it. The smell of wood smoke is the smell of home, the smell of warmth and cooking and life. Your wife stirs on the mattress, woken by your movements, or perhaps by the light now filling the room, or simply by her own internal sense that it's time to begin the day. She sits up slowly, pushes her long hair back from her face. Her hair is covered during the day, as is proper for a married woman, but at night she lets it loose, and now it falls around her shoulders in dark waves. She's the same age as you, give or take, and while the years and the work and the children have left their marks, you still see the girl you married, still feel grateful that her father agreed to the match, still find comfort in her presence. She doesn't speak, not yet. There will be time for words later. Now is the time for action, for the familiar choreography of the morning. She rises, pulls on her outer kirtle over her shift, the long dress that reaches to her ankles, ties it at the waist with a woven belt. She covers her hair with a linen coif, tucking every strand away, then adds a simple veil over that. She's ready for the day. Together, wordlessly, you move about the house in the growing light. She goes to the corner where the water bucket sits, finds it nearly empty. You take it from her, it's your task to fetch water, and you step back out into the yard, into the morning that is now definitely morning, the sky having gone from black to blue to a pale gray that promises the sun will rise soon. The village well is in the center of the village, a communal space, and as you walk toward it, You see other shapes moving, other people beginning their days. Old Thomas, who lives 3 houses down, is driving his 2 goats toward the common pasture. Young Margaret, just married last harvest season, is also carrying a water bucket. The village is waking up, slowly, quietly, each household performing the same rituals, the same tasks, the same endless cycle of work that sustains life. At the well, you greet Margaret with a nod. She nods back, smiles slightly. Words aren't necessary, not really. You both know why you're here, what you're doing. You drop the bucket tied to a rope down into the well. Hear the splash as it hits the water far below. Feel the weight change as it fills. You haul it up hand over hand, the rope rough against your palms, the muscles in your arms and shoulders engaging in this familiar effort. The bucket emerges, full and slopping slightly, and you pour the water into your own bucket. Drop the well bucket back down for Margaret. The water is cold, clean, tasting faintly of earth and stone. This well has served the village for generations, dug by someone's great-grandfather, maintained by communal effort. It's never run dry, even in the driest summers, and for that the village is grateful. There are other villages that have to walk much farther for water, or that depend on streams that sometimes fail. You carry the water back to your house, moving carefully to avoid sloshing too much over the sides. Your wife takes it from you, sets it near the fire. She's already begun preparing breakfast, such as it is. There's a pot hanging over the fire, suspended from an iron hook on a chain. Iron is valuable. That pot and chain are among your most precious possessions. In the pot is yesterday's pottage, the thick soup or thin stew that is the main food of your life. It's made of whatever is available, changed daily but always fundamentally the same. Yesterday it was oats and onions and some dried peas and a few herbs from the garden. Today your wife adds some water to thin it, stirs it with a wooden spoon, adds a bit of salt from the small bag that hangs from a nail in the wall. Precious salt that you bought at the last market day. The children wake, as they always do, to the sounds and smells of the house coming to life. Your son is 8, old enough to help with the work, and your daughter is 6, old enough to help her mother. They sit up, rub their eyes, climb off their mattress. They're dressed much like you and your wife, in simple tunics and shifts, their clothes smaller versions of adult clothes. Because childhood is short here, children become workers as soon as they're able. Your wife ladles pottage into wooden bowls, 4 bowls, 1 for each of you. There are no spoons. You use pieces of yesterday's bread to scoop the pottage up, soaking the bread in the liquid until it's soft enough to eat. The bread is coarse and dark, made from barley flour with some wheat mixed in if you're lucky, baked by your wife in the communal oven that the village shares, or sometimes in a covered pot in the ashes of your own fire. It's dense and chewy and fills the belly, which is what matters. You eat standing or sitting on the bench, not talking much. The pottage is hot and filling, not delicious exactly, but satisfying in the way that warm food in your belly on a cool morning is satisfying. The children eat quickly, hungrily. Growing children are always hungry. As you eat, the light through the door and window grows stronger. The sun is rising now, somewhere beyond the fields and the woods, and its light is spreading across the sky, turning it from gray to pale blue to the clear blue of morning. The village is fully awake now. You can hear voices, the sound of animals, the distant clang of a smith's hammer from the forge at the edge of the village. When the meal is done, your wife collects the bowls, sets them aside to be cleaned later. She takes a cloth, wets it in the water bucket, wipes the children's faces and hands, then her own. Cleanliness is as much as can be managed with limited water and limited time. Full bathing is a rare event, perhaps a few times a year, but faces and hands are wiped daily, and clothes are brushed and aired and mended constantly. Now comes the moment when the family divides, each to their tasks. Your son will come with you to the fields. He's old enough now to begin learning the work, to understand the rhythms of agriculture that will define his life as they've defined yours. Your daughter will stay with your wife, learning the work of the house and the garden, learning to cook and clean and make and mend, learning the skills she'll need when she's grown and married and running her own household. You pull on a heavier outer tunic because the morning is still cool and you'll be out in the open fields. Your son does the same. Your wife hands you a leather bag with bread and cheese and a corked clay bottle of ale. Weak ale that's safer to drink than water and that will sustain you through the morning's work. She hands a similar bag to your son. You step out into the yard one more time, your son at your side. The sun is above the horizon now, a bright disk in the eastern sky, flooding the village with golden light. Everything looks clean and new in this light. The dirt paths, the thatched roofs, the wattle and daub walls. It's going to be a clear day, you can tell. Good weather for the work ahead. You walk through the village, greeting neighbors as you go. John the smith is already at his forge, the fire glowing, his hammer beginning its rhythmic pounding. Peter the reeve is standing outside his house, talking with two other men about something, probably about the work rotation in the fields. The priest, Father Benedict, is just leaving the church, his morning prayers completed. You nod respectfully to him, and he raises his hand in blessing. The path leads out of the village, past the last houses, and opens onto the fields. The great open fields of the medieval English countryside, divided into strips, each household working their scattered strips, the pattern established generations ago and maintained by tradition and custom and necessity. You can see the green of the growing crops, wheat and barley, the neat furrows, the careful organization that makes this system work. This is your life. This is your world. And this is just the beginning of the day, just the morning, and there are hours and hours ahead, hours of work and routine, and the slow passage of time measured not by clocks, but by the sun's journey across the sky. You take a breath of the cool morning air, feel the solid ground beneath your feet, see your son beside you ready to learn and work. This is a slow day in medieval England, and it has only just begun. The walk to the fields takes only a few minutes, but in those minutes, the world transforms around you. Behind you is the village, the collection of houses and yards and small enclosed spaces, the realm of human habitation. Ahead of you are the fields, vast and open, stretching away toward the horizon, interrupted only by the occasional hedgerow or boundary marker. The transition is stark, from enclosed to open, from domestic to agricultural, and you feel it every time you make this walk, this daily journey from one world to another. Your son walks beside you, matching his steps to yours. He's been making this walk with you for 2 years now, since he turned 6 and was deemed old enough to be useful in the fields. Before that, he stayed with his mother and sister, playing in the yard, watching the chickens, beginning to understand the world. But now he's entering the world of men's work, the world of the fields and the crops and the endless labor that feeds the village. The path is worn smooth by countless feet, generations of feet, walking the same route every morning during the working season. In winter, when the fields lie fallow and there's little work to be done outdoors, this path becomes muddy and treacherous, but now in late spring, it's dry and firm, easy to walk. The grass on either side of the path is green and thick, dotted with wild flowers, small white and yellow blooms that nod in the gentle morning breeze. You can see other villagers ahead of you and behind you, all making the same journey. Some are alone, some are in pairs or small groups. Everyone knows where they're going, which strips they need to work today. The organization of the fields is complex, a system that has evolved over centuries, but everyone knows their place in it, knows which strips belong to them, knows which days they owe labor to the Lord's domain, the land that belongs directly to the manor. The fields themselves are enormous from up close, though you know that from a distance, from the perspective of someone looking down from a hill, they would appear organized and neat. Each field is divided into hundreds of strips, long, narrow sections of land, each strip perhaps 20 yards wide and 200 yards long, though the measurements vary. Your family holds several strips scattered throughout the different fields, a strip here, a strip there. The patterns seeming random but actually carefully organized to ensure fairness, to ensure that each household gets some good land and some bad land, some strips in the wet areas and some on the higher, drier ground. This scattering of strips is frustrating in some ways, requiring you to walk from one end of the field to another to tend your different plots. But it's the system. It's how it's always been done. And there's a logic to it, even if that logic isn't always apparent. It means that if one area suffers from too much rain or too little, from pests or disease or bad luck, not all of your crops are affected. You reach the first of your strips, a section planted with wheat. The green shoots are about 6 inches high now, growing well, the rows neat and regular. This wheat was planted last autumn, before the first frost, and it spent the winter dormant beneath the snow, then began growing again as the weather warmed. If all goes well, if the weather cooperates, if the birds and the rabbits and the deer don't do too much damage, if disease doesn't strike, you'll harvest this wheat in late summer, and it will provide flour for bread, the bread that sustains your family through the year. But between now and harvest, there is work to be done, constant work. The work of maintaining the crops, of giving them every possible chance to thrive. And the first and most important of these tasks is weeding. You set down your bag at the edge of the strip, and your son does the same. You both know what needs to be done. You've explained it to him many times, and he's watched you do it. And now he does it himself, though you still supervise, still correct, still teach. Weeding is simple in concept, but demanding in execution. You must remove the plants that are not crops, the wild plants that spring up wherever there's turned earth, the plants that will compete with your wheat for water and nutrients and sunlight. You crouch down at the beginning of a row, and your son crouches beside you. The earth is dark and rich, still slightly damp from yesterday's brief shower. You can smell it, that particular smell of good agricultural soil, earthy and clean and full of promise. Your hands, already rough and calloused from years of this work, reach out and begin the task. You identify a weed, a small plant with broad leaves that's growing between 2 wheat plants. You grasp it firmly at the base and pull, feeling the resistance as its roots cling to the earth, then feeling the release as it comes free. You shake the soil from the roots. It's good soil and shouldn't be wasted, then toss the weed aside. You move to the next weed and the next, working your way along the row with methodical patience. Your son works beside you, his smaller hands doing the same work, though he's slower, less efficient, still learning to distinguish between the wheat and the weeds, still learning the feel of the different plants. Sometimes he pulls up a wheat plant by mistake, and you gently correct him, show him the difference in the leaves, the difference in the way the plants grow. He's learning. In a few years, he'll be as fast and as accurate as you are. The sun climbs higher in the sky as you work. You can feel its warmth on your back, on your shoulders. The heavy wool tunic that felt good in the cool of dawn is starting to feel warm now, but you don't remove it. The sun can burn, and the wool provides protection. Besides, you're used to being warm while working, used to sweat and effort, and the physical strain of labor. Time passes in a strange way when you're doing this kind of work. In one sense, it passes slowly, each minute filled with the repetitive motion of reach, grasp, pull, toss, reach again. Your back begins to ache from the crouching, your knees protest, your hands become sore. You shift position occasionally, moving from a crouch to kneeling, giving different muscles a rest. But in another sense, time passes quickly because you fall into a rhythm, a trance almost, where the work becomes automatic and your mind drifts, thinking about nothing and everything. You think about the weather, about whether the rain will come when it's needed and stay away when it's not. You think about the harvest, months away but already a source of hope and worry. You think about the rent you owe to the Lord, the portion of your harvest that must be given up, and whether there will be enough left over to feed your family through the winter. You think about your cow, about whether she'll give enough milk this summer. You think about your son working beside you and about the life he'll have, likely very similar to your own. Other villagers work nearby on their own strips. You can see them scattered across the field, bent over like you, engaged in the same task. There's a companionship in this, even though you're not working together, even though each family is responsible for their own strips. You're all doing the same thing, all facing the same challenges, all dependent on the same weather and the same soil and the same uncertain future. Occasionally someone straightens up, stretches, catches your eye and nods. Words are exchanged sometimes, brief conversations shouted across the distance between strips. Comments about the weather, about how the crops are growing, about news from the village. John's wife is pregnant again. Old William's cough is getting worse. The Lord is talking about requiring extra labor days for some repairs to the mill. The miller is complaining about something, as millers always do. The sun continues its climb, and you know from long experience that it's approaching mid-morning. Your stomach knows it too, beginning to remind you that breakfast was several hours ago and consisted of only a small bowl of pottage and some bread. You straighten up fully, feeling your spine crack and protest, and look down at your progress. You've worked your way perhaps a quarter of the way along the strip, and your son has kept pace fairly well. There's still a great deal to do, but you've made good progress. You walk to where you left your bag, your son following. You open it and take out the bread and cheese, break off a piece of each and hand them to your son, then take portions for yourself. The bread is the same dark, coarse bread you had at breakfast, but it tastes good now, after hours of work. The cheese is hard and slightly crumbly, made from your cow's milk, aged for several months. It has a strong, sharp taste that you've known all your life, the taste of sustenance. The ale in the clay bottle is warm from sitting in the sun, but it's wet and slightly sweet, and it washes down the bread and cheese. You drink, then hand the bottle to your son, who drinks as well. The ale is weak, as it always is, just strong enough to be safe, not strong enough to make you drunk. Getting drunk is for festivals and holy days, not for work days. You sit for a few minutes, letting your body rest. Your son sits beside you, and you point out across the fields, explaining things to him as you've done many times before. You point to the different fields, explaining the three-field system that governs agricultural life here. One field is planted with winter wheat, like the strip you're working on now. One field is planted with spring crops, barley and oats and peas and beans. And one field lies fallow, planted with nothing, resting, recovering its strength. Next year, the fields will rotate, each field moving to a different role in the cycle, the pattern repeating endlessly. You explain about the Lord's domain, the strips that belong directly to the manor, that are worked by the villagers as part of their obligations. Every able-bodied man in the village owes a certain number of days of labor on the domain, days when you work not your own land, but the Lord's land, and the harvest from those strips goes directly to the manor to feed the Lord and his household and his many servants and retainers. Your son listens, asks questions. He wants to know why the Lord gets so much, why the villagers have to give up their labor and their crops. You explain as best you can the system that structures everything. The Lord owns the land, all of it. The villagers are allowed to farm portions of it in exchange for rent, which is paid partly in crops and partly in labor. The Lord, in turn, provides protection, maintains order, supports the church, and owes allegiance to his own lord, the count or the earl, or eventually the king himself. It's a chain of obligations and duties that stretches from the lowest peasant to the highest nobleman, each person owing something to someone above them. Your son accepts this explanation because it's all he's ever known. It doesn't occur to him to question it, any more than it would occur to him to question the sunrise or the changing of the seasons. This is simply how the world is structured, how it has always been structured, how God ordained it to be structured. There are those who work, those who fight, and those who pray, and each has their role and their place. The rest is over, brief but necessary. You stand, and your son stands with you. You both return to the strip and resume the work. Reach, grasp, pull, toss. Reach, grasp, pull, toss. The rhythm resumes, the meditative quality of repetitive labor. Your hands move automatically now, barely needing direction from your mind. You can identify the weeds by touch almost as much as by sight, can feel the difference between the wheat's smooth stem and the weed's rougher texture. More time passes. The sun climbs higher still, approaching its zenith. The warmth is now quite noticeable, and you feel sweat on your forehead, on your back beneath the wool tunic. This is the hardest part of the day for outdoor work, these hours when the sun is highest and hottest. In high summer, in July and August, it will be almost unbearable, and you'll work in the early morning and late evening, resting during the middle of the day. But now in late spring, it's just warm, not yet truly hot. You reach the end of the strip finally, having worked your way along the entire length. The strip looks better now, cleaner, the wheat visible and unimpeded by competition. You feel a small sense of satisfaction, the satisfaction that comes from completing a task, from seeing visible progress. But there's no time to admire your work, because there are other strips to attend to, other tasks waiting. You move to another of your strips, this one planted with barley. Barley is a spring crop, planted just a few weeks ago, and the shoots are smaller than the wheat, more delicate. Barley will be ready to harvest before the wheat in late summer, and it will provide both food and drink. Barley bread is coarser than wheat bread, less desirable, but filling and nutritious. And barley is also used to make ale, the drink that everyone consumes daily because it's safer than water and provides nourishment. This strip needs weeding too, and you begin again, falling back into the rhythm. Your son is tiring now. You can see it in the way he moves, in the way he pauses more often to stretch his back. He's strong for his age and a good worker, but he's still a child, still building the stamina that this life requires. You don't push him too hard. He'll grow into the work, as you did, as your father did before you. As you work this second strip, you become aware of movement at the edge of the field. You look up and see the reeve, Peter, walking along the headland, the unplowed strip at the edge of the field that serves as a path and boundary. He's inspecting the work, as is his duty. The reeve is elected by the villagers, but serves the Lord, a difficult position that requires balancing the interests of both. He must ensure that the Lord's interests are protected, that the required labor is performed, that the rents are collected, but he must also live among the villagers, must maintain their trust and cooperation. Peter walks slowly, methodically, looking at each strip, noting who is working and who isn't, assessing the progress being made. When he reaches your strip, he stops and nods to you. You straighten up and nod back. "Good progress, Thomas," he says. Your name is Thomas, a common name shared by several men in the village, but everyone knows which Thomas is meant by context. "Thank you, Peter," you reply. "The wheat looks strong this year." "It does," Peter agrees. "If the weather holds, it should be a good harvest. We'll need it. The Lord is talking about raising the rent." You grimace but say nothing. The Lord is always talking about raising the rent, or requiring more labor days, or imposing new fees. It's the way of things. The villagers grumble and complain and pay what's required, because what choice do they have? Peter moves on, continuing his inspection, and you return to your work. The conversation was brief, almost meaningless, but it served a purpose. Peter has seen that you're working diligently, fulfilling your obligations. That's important. If the reeve thinks you're shirking, he can impose fines or require extra labor, and that would be disastrous. The sun passes its zenith and begins its slow descent toward the western horizon. You know without thinking about it that it's early afternoon now, that you've been working for many hours. Your progress on the barley strip is good, more than halfway done. You'll finish it today if you keep working steadily. Your son is flagging noticeably now. His movements are slower, and he stops more frequently to rest. You're tired too, your back a constant ache, your hands sore despite their calluses, but you're used to pushing through tiredness, used to working until the work is done. Still, you take pity on your son. He's done well today, better than many children his age would do. Go back to the house, you tell him. Tell your mother I said you could come back early. You've done a good day's work. He looks at you, relief and gratitude clear on his face, but also something else, a hint of worry that he's failing somehow, not living up to expectations. You smile at him, rest a hand briefly on his shoulder. You've done well, you say. I'm proud of you. Go on now. He gathers his bag and starts back toward the village, walking quickly at first, then slowing to a more normal pace. You watch him go, this child who is becoming a boy, who will someday be a man, who will someday stand in these fields and do this work and teach his own son the same things you're teaching him now. It's the cycle of life, repeating endlessly, generation after generation. Alone now, you return to the work. In some ways, it's easier without your son, without the need to supervise and teach, without the need to slow your pace to match his. You can work at your own speed, fall into your own rhythm. The work goes faster now, your hands moving in familiar patterns, your body bent in a posture it has assumed thousands of times before. You become aware gradually of the other sounds of the field. Birds are singing in the hedgerows that divide the great fields, sparrows and finches, and occasionally a thrush. Their songs are cheerful, unconcerned with human labor and human worries. You can hear the distant lowing of cattle, the village herd being watched by the cow herd on the common pasture. You can hear the wind moving through the growing grain, a soft rustling sound like whispered conversations. These are the sounds of your world, as familiar as your own breathing. You've heard them every day of your life, in spring and summer and autumn, in sun and rain and wind. They're the backdrop to existence, the constant accompaniment to the daily struggle to survive and to make the land yield its bounty. The work continues, steady and unceasing. Reach, grasp, pull, toss. Your mind drifts again, thinking about nothing in particular, or perhaps thinking about everything at once in that scattered, unfocused way that minds think when the body is engaged in physical labor. You think about your wife, back in the village, doing her own endless round of tasks. You think about your daughter, learning from her mother the skills she'll need. You think about the pig in its pen, growing fat on scraps, getting closer to slaughter day. You think about the church, about the priest's last sermon, about sin and salvation and the afterlife. You think about hell, which the priest describes in vivid detail, fire and torment, and eternal suffering for those who sin. You think about heaven, which is harder to imagine, streets of gold and angels singing and the presence of God himself. You think about purgatory, where most people will end up. You've been told working off their sins before being admitted to heaven, assuming their families can afford to pay for masses to be said for their souls. These thoughts come and go like clouds across the sky, drifting through your consciousness without taking firm hold. You're not an educated man. You can't read or write. You know only what the priest tells you and what tradition teaches. But you know the important things. You know right from wrong. You know that murder is a sin, that theft is a sin, that adultery is a sin. You know that you should attend church when you can, that you should tithe a portion of your harvest to support the church, that you should be baptized and married and eventually buried with the proper rites. Beyond that, the finer points of theology are for priests and scholars to debate. Your concern is simpler, more immediate. Your concern is survival, is feeding your family, is paying your rent, is staying healthy and strong enough to work. These are the things that matter, the things that occupy your thoughts and your energy. The afternoon wears on, the sun continuing its descent. The shadows begin to lengthen, stretching out across the fields. You finish the barley strip finally, completing the task you set for yourself today. You straighten up for the last time, feeling every joint and muscle protest, feeling the accumulated fatigue of hours of bent-over labor. But you're not quite done yet. Before you can return to the village, there's one more task, one that's required of all the villagers. You must spend time working on the Lord's domain, fulfilling your labor obligation. The reeve keeps careful track of these days, noting who has worked and who still owes time, and it's important to stay current, to avoid the fines and penalties that come with shirking your duty. You walk across the field to where the domain strips are located, easily identified because they're often larger than the individual strips, and because there are usually several villagers working them together. Today there are 4 men there, all working on weeding a large strip of oats. You join them, taking your place in the line, bending once more to the familiar task. Working on the domain is different from working your own land. There's less personal investment, less sense that your effort is directly benefiting your family. But there's a camaraderie here that doesn't exist when you're working alone. The men talk as they work, exchanging news and gossip, making jokes, complaining about the reeve and the Lord and the weather and anything else that occurs to them. You learn that Harold's oldest daughter is being courted by a young man from the next village. You learn that the smith has agreed to make a new plowshare for the communal plow, but it will cost dearly. You learn that the Lord is planning to visit the manor next month, which means extra work preparing for his arrival, cleaning and repairing, and making everything look proper. The conversation flows around you, and you contribute occasionally, but mostly you just listen, enjoying the company, appreciating the way that shared labor makes the time pass more quickly. This is one of the benefits of the domain work, the social aspect, the sense of community that comes from working together toward a common goal, even if that goal is enriching the Lord rather than yourselves. An hour passes, perhaps more. The sun is definitely descending now, moving toward the horizon, the light taking on that golden quality that comes in late afternoon. You fulfilled your obligation for today, put in the required time on the domain. The other men are finishing as well, straightening up, gathering their tools and bags. Together, in a loose group, you all start walking back toward the village. The conversation continues, more relaxed now that the work is done. The conversation continues, more relaxed now that the work is done. Someone mentions that his wife is brewing ale today, and there might be enough to share if anyone wants to stop by after supper. Someone else mentions that there's talk of organizing a work party to repair the village well cover, which has developed some concerning cracks. The village appears ahead of you, the familiar cluster of houses, smoke rising from several of the roofs where cooking fires are being built up for the evening meal. You can see figures moving about, women and children mostly, going about their tasks. The sight is welcoming, the sight of home after a long day of work. You part ways with the other men as you reach the village, each heading toward their own house. Your feet know the way without thinking, walking the familiar path to your door. You can smell cooking, the scent of pottage and bread drifting from several houses, reminding you that you're hungry, that you've eaten only a small amount of bread and cheese since breakfast, that your body needs fuel to replenish what was spent during the day's labor. You reach your house and push open the door. Inside, the fire is burning brightly, and your wife is there, stirring the pot that hangs over it. Your daughter is helping her, and your son is sitting on the bench, looking tired but content. They all look up as you enter, and your wife smiles. "Good day?" she asks. "Good day," you confirm. The wheat strip is weeded, and most of the barley. "I'll finish the barley tomorrow." She nods, approving. This is the kind of conversation you have, practical, focused on the work and the tasks, and the endless cycle of what needs to be done. There's affection there, beneath the practical surface, but it doesn't need to be spoken. It's demonstrated through actions, through the way she has food ready for you, through the way you work to provide for the family, through the thousand small gestures of care and concern that make up a marriage. The afternoon is drawing to a close, transitioning toward evening. The hardest work of the day is done, but there are still tasks remaining, still things to attend to before the day can truly end. But for now, for this moment, you're home, you're with your family, and you allow yourself a brief moment of rest, sitting on the bench, feeling the ache in your muscles, appreciating the warmth of the fire and the smell of cooking food. This is the rhythm of life in medieval England, the endless cycle of work and rest, of planting and growing and harvesting, of labor and food and survival. It's a hard life, a demanding life, but it's your life, and you know nothing else, want nothing else. This is your place in the world, your role in the great chain of being that stretches from the lowliest peasant to God himself. And the day is not yet over. There are still hours to go before sleep, still tasks to complete, still the evening routine to follow. But that will come in its time, in its proper place, as everything does in this ordered, predictable, slowly turning world. The day continues its slow passage, moving from afternoon to evening, from evening to night. The family gathers for their evening meal, simple pottage and bread once again, eaten by the light of the fire. The children are sent to wash their faces and hands, to say their prayers before the small wooden cross that hangs on the wall. As darkness falls completely, the family prepares for sleep. The fire is banked once more, buried under ashes to preserve the coals for tomorrow's rekindling. The door is barred. The children curl up on their mattress, their voices murmuring sleepily before falling silent. You and your wife lie down on your own mattress, pulling the woolen blanket over you both. Outside, the village settles into quiet. A dog barks once, then is still. The church bell rings for Compline, the night prayer, its single note rolling across the darkness. In the fields, the wheat and barley and oats continue their silent growing, drawing sustenance from the soil, reaching toward the sun that will rise again in a few hours. This has been a slow day in medieval England, a day like thousands of others, like millions of others across the centuries. Nothing remarkable happened. No battles were fought, no great decisions made. It was simply a day of work and routine, of survival and sustenance, of the ordinary life lived by ordinary people in an ordinary place, and yet, in its ordinariness lies its truth. This is how most of history was actually lived, not in the grand events recorded in chronicles and histories, But in these quiet moments, these daily rhythms, these simple acts of living and working and raising families, as you drift towards sleep, your last thought is of tomorrow. Tomorrow you'll wake again, tend the animals again, work the fields again, eat the same food again. The cycle will continue, as it always has, as it always will. And that thought, rather than being depressing, is somehow comforting. There is security in routine, peace in predictability, rest in knowing your place and your purpose. Sleep comes easily after a day of honest labor. Your breathing slows, deepens, and you slip away into darkness, into dreams, into the temporary death that is sleep, knowing that morning will come, and with it, another day, another cycle, another slow turning of the wheel of life. Thank you for watching this journey through a slow day in medieval England. I hope you found peace and rest in this quiet exploration of ordinary life in extraordinary times. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, and share where you're watching from in the comments below. Sleep well, and may history's gentle whispers carry you to peaceful dreams. Good night.